The Pirates squandered another Paul Skeens brilliant start last night against Houston, but I'm here to tell you Paul Skeens isn't being traded. They don't need another rebuild. They just need a new contractor to get the project back on track. That's next on Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Welcome to Locked On Pirates. I'm Gary Morgan. Today, we're going to talk about last night's game a bit. Players, I think, should be off the table in trade talks. And more than anything, we're going to talk about why this team doesn't need a rebuild. Not another one, not another reboot, nothing. Normally, I'd segment all this out. But today, it really feels like these three topics cross over with each other an awful lot. So much so that might be difficult for me today. In other words, I might overlap just because of passion. Okay. So I'm getting into these segments. Let's start with last night. Okay. Paul Skeens was incredible. I mean, incredible. 8 innings pitched, 1 run, and the only blemish, a Christian Walker solo home run in the 7th inning. 8 strikeouts. I mean, dominant, doesn't even begin to cover it. Unfortunately, Lance McCullers Jr. was legitimately great too. The Pirates' offense is what it is, and it makes it hard to appreciate when the opponent is actually pitching well. And all I can say is last night, McCullers was throwing some pitches that just didn't look real. I mean, Pitching Ninja was kind of going nuts on it. If you follow him at all on social media, I mean, Lance McCullers' pitches were insanely moving yesterday. I mean, they looked like he was a wizard at some point. And I know his overall numbers are terrible, so you look at them and you think like, wow, this should be easy. But his last couple starts, he's kind of figured things out and gotten back to, well, himself. So I wasn't all that surprised that he was good last night. That said, the Pirates offense doesn't help matters. So it does make it really difficult to judge. Still, you get 8 innings of 1 run ball from anyone, you expect to win. 3-0 was the outcome. Dennis Santana gave up 2-run jack to put it out of reach. But the bats never even started the climb, really. Here's the thing. The Astros are actually a good example of a team that didn't exactly tattoo balls all night. But they have guys who can, on occasion, put the ball over the wall. And a lot more of them than the Pirates. That's the main difference, really, when you look at these two clubs. The Houston Astros kind of are the gold standard when it comes to rebuilding teams and rebuilding franchises. And they get used as an example of how small markets should operate. They do so from a perch of being very much so not a small market. Okay? Houston is not a small market. They have more money than the Pirates. They didn't always spend it. And they realized that they could never just spend it and get where they wanted to go. They had to build a system that would support them, that would make it so that they didn't have to go out and buy everything they needed in order to win championships or in order to be in the dance for championships. They've been in a weak division for years and years and years. Really, ever since moving out of the NL Central, they've had the Texas Rangers who, you know, they're either really, really good or they're really, really not. And the year really does tend to change for them. I mean, they can have a World Series team one year and miss the playoffs entirely the next. The Rangers are a strange team, built with a lot of guys who are in and out of the lineup. built with a lot of guys who either surprise perform here and there, or they're very spotty with their performance. Or so the Rangers are not great, and Texas and Houston tends to be more steady. Seattle, they've been threatening to be good for years and years. They're leading their division right now, but you can just feel Houston breathing down their backs, right? And Seattle probably isn't going to spend enough to outpace the Astros come playoff time. You know, if the Mariners are going to get in, it's going to be because they made a big trade and brought in something big. That could happen. The Angels, man, they've had one of the best players in the world forever, but that's about it. They've never built the pitching. They bring up their prospects sometimes the year after they draft them, and while some of you tend to think the Pirates should do the same, I see in the comments a lot, it hasn't worked for them. Rarely does it work because there's a big jump between being a high school kid or a 22-year-old college player and being a professional Major League Baseball player. There's a big step from there to here. So Houston has had a modicum of success, a good stretch of World Series, a good stretch of being competitive, but they didn't get all this from their rebuild. They got a good base from their rebuild. And if you remember, if you're older, like I am, you remember Houston being a joke for a long time in the NL Central. And when they decided to tear down and really start over, man, they tore all the way down. They sold everything they had, and they drafted and they developed and they signed in the international free agent pool, and they used different sets of analytics, and they cheated. I think everybody knows that too. That's part of the story. But what keeps them good is their willingness to trade guys when they're just about out of options as far as like extending them. Like Kyle Tucker was a good example. They weren't going to get that done. So, they make the trade with the Cubs. They get a couple players. One can help now. One can help later. It's a good way to go. They took a step back for sure by trading Kyle Tucker. You don't trade a player like that and get better. But they recouped their loss a little bit, at least as far as getting some MLB talent back in exchange. And they're able to keep the train going. And for their division, it's enough. So Houston's just not a good comp for this sort of thing, because the Pirates really need to do it more on we're building for this target set of years. It just doesn't work trying to pretend you can do this perpetually here in Pittsburgh, because at some point you're going to have some pretty big stars, and you got to draft low to get those here. You're not going to go sign them. You're not going to develop fifth rounders into that. At least not this development unit isn't. And I just think that all in all, these two teams should be closer right now, especially for where the Pirates are supposed to be in their rebuild and where the Houston Astros are supposed to be in their retool. If you think about it, they're in the midst right now of moving on from a lot of the guys that just won them their last World Series and onboarding guys they hope will bring them their next one. And somehow they've managed to create a unit that has enough of each of those components that they're able to kind of bridge this year. I know you hate the word bridge year if you're somebody that grew up in the Huntington era, but it's a bridge year. They might make the playoffs this year. I don't think they're 100% expecting to, but in that division, it's possible. And with their pockets, it's really possible, because they really just need maybe one more bat that they can count on. And they might have that on the injured list right now. So Houston is not exactly a gold standard comp for the Pirates. As long as I expect them to be a great matchup. They should be, though, at this point. Pirates can play better than they did last night. We've seen them hitting better than that last night. I'm inclined to just say Lance McCullers had a great day. I am getting tired of the coincidence that everyone facing Paul Skeens has a great day. There's probably something to that, though. Guys do like to step up when they're facing somebody better than them. And everybody probably feels Paul Skeens is better than them. So I bet you get A+ game out of everybody. It's a difficult situation. That said, we're going to start talking in the next segment here about why this team doesn't need to go into a rebuild and what I think are the untouchables, the guys that there's no reason to trade. In fact, it would be stupid to do so. You ever get home from an event and you look at your bank account and you go, what happened? Like if you hand your wife your debit card and she goes to the team shop on opening day and buys an authentic jersey for, say, $200, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on Ubers when I would travel. Now I budget a little bit smarter, kind of plan my trips out a little bit better, and I save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's Monarch Money, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. All right, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. I'm Gary. Thank you for joining me. Hey, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit me with a like, leave me a comment. We'll talk about any of them that make any kind of sense at all. I love interacting. I've learned that when I interact with people that don't make a lot of sense, they tend to just get angry. And I'd rather just avoid that. And I apologize for my voice a little today too. I'm having a real bad allergy day for some reason. So just woke up filled with crap in my head for some reason. So I don't think this team needs another rebuild. I think they just need a new contractor to finish the job. Okay. I know it doesn't feel that way, but I also know I think they have a good core. I think Paul Skeens, O'Neal Cruz, and Brian Reynolds, Spencer Horwitz, even I could toss into that since they just got him and they've got him for another 5 years. I think that core right there can probably grow together for a while. I'm less concerned about who they will trade and more concerned about who I think they shouldn't trade. Okay. So those four, Paul Skeens, O'Neal Cruz, Brian Reynolds, Spencer Horwitz, you're good through the end of the decade for the most part. Andrew McCutchen won't get traded because Andrew McCutchen's not going to get traded. He doesn't want to. The Pirates don't want to. I'm sure Ben Cherington would love to, but Bob Nutting says no. Bob Nutting has said no. In fact, he's here because of Bob Nutting. So that's not going to happen. Bubba Chandler, I just don't think you should at this point. I'm not saying that I think he's ready to take over and carry a heavy load. But teams don't typically trade their number one prospects or their number two prospects. You don't do that. Even when you're really, really trying to go for something, it tends to be pretty hard to pry some of those players out of your hands. I know it helped them, although they ultimately didn't win with it. But part of the Juan Soto deal to the Padres was James Wood. Wouldn't you love to have him if you're the Padres in your outfield? I mean, they need a player like that so bad. And I think it would be a difference maker for the Padres, probably more than Juan Soto was in the year they had him. So was it a bad trade? No, because they got what they needed at the time and they won with it. They just didn't win at all. But long term, that's a guy that, man, I think they need to have, especially as they think about changing their spending policies in San Diego with the new ownership. I think the Pirates should probably refrain from trading Hunter Barco. They have to have a lefty in this rotation. We talked yesterday about potentially trading Bailey Falter at some point. Well, I don't think you can do that if you move Hunter Barco. And I don't think you should do that either way. That's one of your top talents and one of your top options from the left side. And I just don't think you have enough of those to be sending any more of them out. And then Connor Griffin, I just think that there's absolutely no reason to trade Connor Griffin. He looks every bit a number one pick, and I'd let that progress and let him be part of the next charge or even the tail end of this one. I think that's where I would leave it. Anything else should be on the table because this to me is not a rebuild. This is more of it's time to bolt on actual pieces that help. And I just don't believe Ben Cherington's got that in him. I just do not believe that Ben Cherington has the vision to actually take this team further. And it's not even just about money. Take that off the table because I know Bob doesn't spend enough. But if you just gave me the conglomeration of all the money that Ben Cherington spent this offseason, which wasn't a whole lot, but if you give me the combined salaries for Tommy Pham, Adam Frazier, Caleb Ferguson, Andrew Heaney, pick your poison. Whoever else you want to, whoever else you want to name. You give me all that, I think I can probably find one player to take that money that can hit some damn home runs. The thing that this team has needed desperately since Ben Cherington got here is power. Desperately. They've needed power. And the only power that he's really traded away that mattered was Starling Marte, who was on an expiring contract and straight up said he didn't want to go through another rebuild, which it very clearly was going to be. So he asked to be traded. And Josh Bell, who wasn't playing good defense at first base, is way too streaky to be your best player, but he did have power. And they got nothing for him, unfortunately. Maybe Eddie Yean will finally turn out. We'll see. He sure looked good in spring. Hasn't looked good in AAA. But I guess Eddie Yean could come along and make that okay at least. Point is, those two examples of power going out, what are the examples of power coming in? Of all the moves that Ben Cherington's made, we make a lot of jokes about how he continually gets middle infielders, second baseman and shortstop, right? Most of those second basemen, it would be a stretch to think they could play shortstop. And I just don't understand the philosophy of continuing to bring in these little water bug type hitters when you clearly have to have power. Like, you clearly have to have it. You have to bring it in. You have to develop it. I don't know how you get it if you're not going to focus on wanting to get it. They don't even try to get it. Like, Spencer Horwitz is a guy who could develop into a little bit of power, but I think he maxes out around 20. And in this league, well, I don't know that you consider that a power hitter per se. I think you consider that a hitter. I think you want a guy that can hit 15 or 20 and give you a decent on-base percentage too. I think that's what Spencer Horwitz could be. But that's not like, a power hitter. O'Neal Cruz can hit majestic home runs, or he can also hit line drives off of the Clemente wall that wind up being singles. He hits the ball real hard, but he's not searching for launch angle. He's searching for hard contact, and rightly so. It's what makes O'Neal Cruz a good hitter. Brian Reynolds is not a guy that's going to seek out home runs. He's not just going to go up there and swing for the fences. He's going to hit for contact. He's going to get on base. He's going to take his walks. Yeah, he's going to put some over the fence, but it's not his bread and butter. Andrew McCutchen, you can tell, has been trying to become more of a home run hitter. You know, he has worked really hard on being selective about the pitches that he really takes a hack at. You can tell he's taking a different approach with trying to get the ball in the air a little bit more with more authority. But Andrew McCutchen, at his very best, probably a 25 home run guy? If he focused on it, that's not going to help. Not now, because he's no longer that guy, first of all. And second, I think it diminishes what Andrew McCutchen is. Andrew's just a guy, a back control guy. He will hit the ball where it's pitched. And he's good enough at it that he can wait out a pitcher sometimes until he gets that pitch, that he can do what he wants to do with it as far as hitting that home run. So there's something to it, but not enough. This team needs a bopper. They have to have a bopper. They have to have somebody, even if he strikes out a lot. It's got to be power. Power, power, power. That's got to be the focus. And I'm to the point where I feel like you have to change the GM if you want to see the approach change. Because he has had 6 years to bring in power, and he has not. In fact, most of the waiver claims that they bring in, they're not even about that. And look at Alexander Canario. Here's a guy who's known for his power, right? And he's having more success since they started playing him, and I appreciate it. I've enjoyed watching Alexander Canario. He's been a lot of fun to watch. But wasn't he supposed to be a guy that was going to hit like 20, 30 home runs, or could hit 20, 30 home runs? Isn't that what made him interesting? I think so. What have they done with him? Well, they've kind of turned him into a singles hitter, right? Single or double, right? He is getting on base. He is collecting hits. I appreciate it. I've told you I think he's a better player. I've told you I think he's improved. I've told you that I like the pickup. Kudos on all of it. But where's the power? Even when guys come here with power, they don't put power out when they play. It's not the way this team is built. It's not the way they think. That's something that has to change. That needs to change in a big way. It needs to be a trade. They need to change the way they're drafting. They need to change the things they're looking for in development. They need to stop scouring the waiver claim wire for guys that might be able to turn it. Like, we should be beyond that stuff at this point. Like, we just picked up this Ronnie Simone or Simon, or however you pronounce it, from Miami. I was just on the MLB Squad show the other day, and I'm thinking to myself, like, we're talking about how bad Miami is, and I'm thinking to myself, we just picked somebody up off waivers from them. What are we doing? We're below them in the standings by a game. Miami stinks. They DFA a guy that has options still, which should tell you something. You DFA a guy that has options, you are completely giving up. You're not going like, oh, well, we're out of options. We don't have a choice here. We don't want to let you go. We're going to DFA you. You're DFAing somebody that has options. You are done. You've seen all that you need to see. You don't want to see anymore. Not for the Pirates, though. That option year, let's bring him in. I mean, even if he plays a position that we've got more than covered in spades, let's do it. Listen, the construction project started out fine. They've actually got some really nice pieces of this wall. They just do not have the right guy to finish putting in all the finishings. I want somebody better and smarter to do the decoration at this point. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about that. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy to use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Join the Trademaster program at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Listen, there's a lot of buzz. Trade Reynolds, trade Skeens. Why bother? You're not building around them. Listen, this is a longer story than one season. Always has been, always will be. Baseball is not like the NBA where you can rebuild your team in an off season because, so and so disappointed you. It doesn't work that way in Major League Baseball. Whether you like it or not, you have to forecast. You have to be thinking about 2028. It may not be the most important thing in your mind, but it has to at least come into your mind. This team will not get better if they trade Paul Skeens. In fact, Paul Skeens is primarily the reason that you feel it's worth building on. This team will not get better if they trade O'Neal Cruz. He's their only true power hitter. He's a 3 true outcomes guy, and I know a lot of you hate that, but that's what he is. A 3 true outcomes guy with a ton of speed. And that makes it dangerous to give him one of those 3 true outcomes. Or 2 of them. And this team won't get better if they trade Brian Reynolds. I know Brian Reynolds started out rough, but we're seeing Brian Reynolds now. The Brian Reynolds we know is there. The Brian Reynolds we've watched be there. They made a big commitment for this team to Brian Reynolds through 2030. Okay? And they have a club option for 2031 that they'll never dream of picking up. The real window for this team to win with Paul Skeens is from next year to 2029. That's the window. They've got to make it happen. That's when they know they have Paul Skeens, O'Neal Cruz, Brian Reynolds, Spencer Horwitz, Mitch Keller, guys like that. The more of those you think about trading, the less of them are there for this. And I question the ability to go out and find somebody that's going to be better than Brian Reynolds. You can trade Brian Reynolds for somebody that you think could get to that level. But you're talking about 2027, 2028, they start maybe playing close to like what Brian Reynolds does. Think about the step back that if you do decide to trade like O'Neal Cruz and Brian Reynolds, well then, yeah, you might as well go ahead and trade Paul Skeens, but don't sell it to me as a rebuild. Just sell it to me as a white flag. You're just giving up. Because that's a complete brand new whitewash, start the whole damn thing over again. And this fan base won't put up with it. They just won't. They haven't put up with this one well. Okay, and I mean now, like at the beginning of it, I think there was actually a healthy dose of the fan base that understood where we were and understood what needed to happen and were patient and willing to wait for it. And we all knew it was coming, and we all knew what pain we were in for. We just didn't think that it needed to last 5 or 6 years. I still don't think it needed to last 5 or 6 years. I can also look you right in the eye and tell you if Paul Skeens didn't get drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates, I don't believe we're having this same conversation. I think we are probably talking about a full teardown rebuild because without him, it does not look nearly as plausible. And I think I'm to the point where if you take away Paul Skeens or O'Neal Cruz or Brian Reynolds, I feel like the plausibility level goes way down. The offense is so bad that it's really hard to consider trading anything successful offensively. That said, there are guys I definitely think that I want them to pull the trigger on. First and foremost, if they can find a buyer, I don't even care what they get for him. I'm trading Ke'Bryan Hayes. I absolutely would pull the trigger on a Ke'Bryan Hayes deal. Again, I don't even care what you get. I just want him out of the way so this team quits pretending that third base is okay. It's not. Ke'Bryan Hayes can't hit. And I've been okay with the glove, and he hasn't in any way, shape, or form been the Pirates' biggest problem throughout the years. I loved the signing at the time. I thought it was smart. I still think it's an affordable and smart contract. I just think as long as he's here and as long as he's under that contract, this team is never going to stop pretending that they've got somebody competent at third base who can also hit. Ke'Bryan Hayes can't. I'm all done playing that game. And you've got guys like Nick York and Nick Gonzalez and Jack Brannigan and Malcolm Nunez, and any of those four could hit for a hell of a lot more power than Ke'Bryan Hayes does. And if that means a few more singles or a few more infield ground ball base hits, so freaking be it. This team has got to take a step back at third base in order to take a step forward, if you ask me. And until they move him, it's just always going to be this crap part of the lineup that you have to deal with. And yes, the defense is great, and I'll miss it. I just think there's guys that they have to pull the trigger on. Mitch Keller's another one. Like, I like Mitch Keller. I think Mitch Keller is an important part of this rotation. I also think they've got some really interesting rotation pieces coming, and I'd like to see them come up here and pitch. Ideally, in a perfect world, with their signed pitcher, Mitch Keller, in the mix still. I'd love to keep that. But you do have to give to get. And that might be a good place to give to get, because there is a point coming up pretty quickly where he's going to make $20 million a year. For this team, my God, that makes him king. They might have had to give him share of ownership of the team, for God's sake. Mitch Keller is a guy that you could move for a bat. I think, again, you'd take a step back there and hope that you backfill it with young pitching, and then you hopefully get some power. I don't want this guy doing it. I want somebody that can identify power and bring it in. And then have the balls to play it, knowing it's going to strike out and whatnot. This is not going to happen under Ben Cherington. Okay? That's where I'm at. But I also just don't think this is in need of a rebuild. I just don't think the city will tolerate it. I don't think the owner will tolerate it, quite honestly. And you can laugh at that if you want, since he's mostly responsible for how hard it is to build here. But I don't think he'll tolerate another rebuild, and I don't think he'll hire somebody that would require it. I can tell you right now to comfort you, Paul Skeens isn't getting traded. O'Neal Cruz isn't getting traded. And Brian Reynolds isn't getting traded. Neither is Andrew McCutchen, but whatever. This isn't going to be that this offseason. I don't think Ben Cherington has the autonomy or authority to make that happen. And I don't think Bob Nutting will allow it. I think he believes he can bring somebody else in to build on this and make it work. I also think he believes that's what Huntington did with Littlefield's mess. So there's some precedent there. Either way, this team isn't good right now, but there are good parts. Too many good parts to think that you're just going to sell off again. They're not there yet. The national media is always going to be there 5 years before the Pirates. Okay. They're not there. This is the core of your team. It needs attitude. It needs attitude competently. Hasn't been. But it's not going to go into another rebuild. I don't believe. That's all I got for you. We'll talk a little bit more tomorrow, and hopefully the Pirates will rebound and take the next 2 games of this Houston series.